Good. Hi, Colin.
Hi, Andy.
How you doing, mate? All right?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Thanks for having me along this evening. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, me too. Me too. So let me just make sure that we're all in the room. There you go. Good. Yeah, me too, Colin. And so hi, everybody. Just waiting for everybody to come in the rooms. Please say hi so I can see you there. And finally, we've got the amazing Colin Spence here with us. We had to postpone last time because of that darn thing of COVID that I had. Hi, Ali. That's great. Oh, people are coming in now. Hi, everybody. Great to see you. So I know a lot of people have been looking forward to this, Colin. And what's really lovely, whenever I share anything of yours, really, and especially when I've shared these chats, it's just the love that pours out for you. And that's kind of why we're talking a little bit today. We're going to come on to this in a little bit, I know. But I think it's just a real testament, Colin, to the impact you've had with us in the community and what you do for others. And that's always great to get that appreciation, to feel valued, I'm sure. But well, hi everybody, loads of people coming in. Judy, Patricia, Zoe, Cheryl, Tanya. Hi everybody, loads of people. We've got great numbers coming in. Right then, Colin. So we've known each other quite a while. We were saying off air, weren't we? We feel like kind of a bit like the old gits, really, because we've been around a bit.
I've known you since 2017.
Wow, is it really that long? God, so that is a while then, isn't it? Yeah.
2017. I think it was actually started from the ICP.
Yes, because many of us are kind of graduates from the ICP, aren't we? It's a shame we don't have the kind of virtual versions of the yearbooks, they used to get at school. That'd be quite cool, looking back at those.
With the old hats and little tassels.
Yes, that's oh my God, yeah, that would have been good. Any excuse to get me into a gown, Colin, as we know. Well, let's get.
I'd have to buy several gowns to fit me.
Well, me too, but well, it's great to see you, Colin. And as I say, a lot of people I know are looking forward to this evening. It's really good. We've spoken so many times, so we've known each other for quite a while, and we've ended up being quite good buddies, really. And your backstory, we always start off with the origin stories of people because people find that really interesting. And a lot of the time people can relate to parts of people's backstories, and other times it's just really interesting, right? I think to hear other people's experiences, and this is something we're going to talk about a little bit later on as well. So let's start wherever you want to start, Colin. What's your backstories? I know there's a lot of parts to that are really interesting, but also relevant to some of the things we're going to be talking about a little bit later on.
Okay, well, I was born in 1963. My parents both came over to England from Jamaica in the late 50s. It was very hard for them when they arrived because they weren't allowed to just go and get a flat or anything like that. So they tried to find B&Bs, etc., and were refused. Back in those days, it would say something like, no Irish, no blacks, no dogs. And that's what that was like. But very fortunate for my parents. They stumbled across a guy who allowed them to have a caravan. Yeah, he had a spare caravan. And so he plotted it up on the front of his house. And they stayed in that for a few weeks. They then went out, found work. Dad worked at ABC in Camden Town, which was a baker's back in the day. And Mum found a job where she learned how to sew. And it took off from there. A few months later, or a year or so later, they left the caravan, bought their house, and then had me. But what I didn't say in that time, they had quite a few of us. There was 10 of us in total.
Oh.
10 of us. And the majority stayed back in Jamaica for a little while. So I was born in the UK, and then my brother Derek, he came along a few years later. And as time went on, the other brothers and sisters came to join us in the UK. Growing up in the UK for me as a black person, when I look back, it wasn't that bad, yeah? But I could always feel there was something not quite right. Because I had a lot of white friends, you'd always hear things like, you're okay, yeah? And if you went round to someone's house, it was, "Ooh, yeah, he's okay, he can come in." Yeah. At the time, you don't think too much of it until you start getting into your teenager years. And then it becomes more apparent that you are different. Anyway, you muddle through that. You're trying to make sense of it all, but you don't make sense of it until you get into your 20s. Yeah, that's when you probably start. That's when I found out who I really was, what my values are, yeah, where I belong, and where I don't belong, or where I don't belong, would I want to go there in the first place? No. But I had good friends of all different ethnicities. So in my 20s, you know, so if I go back to school, when I left school, I went to college, but I couldn't have college because I couldn't earn any money to go out clubbing with my friends and stuff like that. Well, that was a priority back in those days, yeah. And I left college, and the sad thing was I went to college to study law, yeah. And I was there for a few months. Well, I can't do this. Friday nights and Saturday nights were important for a youngster. So in many ways, I was glad when I stopped going to college, because that's when I really grew up, yeah. Didn't go to college, found myself a job, became a butcher. It was the very first job I had, yeah. And what was good about that and bad about that, when I actually went for the interview for Dewhurst, I didn't think I was going to get the job. When I walked in, there were several people. I was the only black male. And I thought, oh no, no chance, no chance. But they did a test, which is called a block test. And you'd walk into a room and they would have a jump end of pork. And they would go through very quickly of how you debone that jump end of pork. Well, to my satisfaction, I took the bone out. It was absolutely spotless. There was no meat on it. And he said, the job is yours. Yeah. And that must have been somewhere about 11th in the queue. Yeah, after a good few hours waiting. So I worked for Dewhurst for a few years and thoroughly enjoyed it. Became a qualified butcher. And then I went to work for various other butchering companies. And then, as I got older, I became a dad at 19. Yeah, sorry, I said 20s, but I actually became a dad at 19 years of age, and I was shaking and scared when I was told, but absolutely adored my son when he was born. Yeah, and to this day, oh yeah, just thinking about Lee now. The only bad thing about my son is that he supports Arsenal, whereas he should have grown up as a Tottenham fan. But yeah, then my daughter came along, and in total I have 4 children and 7 stepchildren. And I adore every single one of them if they were my flesh and blood. Then in my mid-20s, I decided, when, you know, one day, as you do, this is what I see with clients now, is that I just decided I want a dog. And I liked the look of German Shepherds. So I thought, look, I'll get German Shepherd. On getting a German Shepherd, Bruno was, how can I put it? Absolutely adorable, you know. But it didn't take me long to find out or feel that there was something wrong with Bruno. Yeah? But before I even noticed there was something wrong with Bruno, I loved the fact that as a 12-week, 13, 14, 15-week-old puppy, he was always by my side. And even when we went out for our walks, he'd pull on the lead, he'd go off to the left, he'd just stay up to my leg. And there's me walking down the road, as you do in Hackney back in those days, thinking this is the bee's knees. This is how it should be. Until one morning, someone approached us, and then Bruno ran behind my legs and started showing his teeth. And I didn't think that was right. So, you know, I looked around for trainers to help. It was very difficult because what we have now, the platform we have now for dog trainers, behaviourists, you could just open your front door and fall over a dog trainer. Back then you'd be struggling, yeah. you'd be struggling. And struggle I did until someone pointed me in the right direction. And Beverly Robinson, may she rest in peace. That's where my journey sort of started. She wasn't a behaviourist, but what she didn't know about dogs, no one did know. No one knew. And she taught me how to be patient, how to not overexpose, and how to, build confidence. Something in the early days, I used to look at Beverly and think, this is a dog. What are you talking about building confidence? It's a dog, But she was right, and patience became a virtue. So I learned a little bit about dogs at that point. It didn't take me long before Beverly tapped me on the shoulder one evening. I used to train on a Tuesday evening and on a Thursday evening. And it was a good few weeks in. She asked, would I like to be a helper? As people probably already gathered, I don't shut up. I don't shut up, especially if I'm talking about dogs. And I became a helper and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And that's when I knew, but I always knew as a young child, I wanted to work with dogs. But that just confirmed it for me. And yes, I said yes to that. So I took Bruno along. We went back on a Thursday evening when it was my turn to help out. And I noticed the more I was working as a helper was the more I was paying more attention to what Beverly had told me in the past. It was at that point I was then becoming more into dogs, no pun intended. And it sort of took off from there. But Bruno passed away 3 years later, and I can't remember exactly, it's such a long time ago, what that was. And then I didn't have a dog for a little while. And it's like jumping forward, and then sort of like joining the police service. And at that point, I did have a dog, but I was looking after a friend's dog, which should have been a 6 week job, turned out to be 6 years. Because when he comes to collect Taz didn't want to go.
Nice.
Sure, it was nice because I didn't really want to give him up either. And we came to a mutual agreement. He would pay for the food. I'd look after the dog, and that's exactly what happened. And then it became a shared thing. If I was going away or going out for the evening, he would have Taz. But Taz was a super dog. You just didn't even know he was around. And sometimes when I'm talking about my past dogs, Taz always gets left out for some reason. It's only because he was so quiet. Say boo to a goose, come home from work and you come to the dog just to meet you, and it was just amazing. And it wasn't long after having Taz that I decided to look into getting a good job, because I didn't like the jobs that I had. Like most people do, you go in on Monday, you get home on Friday, and you don't want to go back on Monday. So I decided to apply to the police service. I didn't think I would get in. I applied to the City of London, and what's unique about the City of London was, back in the day, you had to be 5'9" in order to join. 5'9" for a male and 5'8" for a female. But I got knocked back because of the height difference. Discrimination. And then a few years later, someone said to me, try again, because now they have lowered the height. I said, nah, you're winding me up. But I did try again and got in. I was absolutely taken aback. So I spent 3 years in the city as a probationer, and it's not a very big area. It's just a square mile, and in that square mile, you basically have got 2 police stations: Bishopsgate and Snow Hill. You could walk that square mile, but even if you're trying to walk a square mile, it's a lot of walking. But when it's cutting to do the 2 divisions, it's not much. So Monday to Sunday on earlys or lates was a little bit boring, yeah. But on nights, you made the most of it. The lights were busy. And then some people may remember the entry points, yeah, IRA terrorism. So when you're looking at it from that point of view,
what kind of dates are we looking at now, Colin? When were you in the police? What period?
So the entry points came out of play in the early 90s. Yeah. So that was the 90s that we're looking at. And then, like I said, I spent 3 years there. So we're looking at all the working on the entry points on the nights was absolutely fabulous, because it was a lot of stopping vehicles, that type of thing. Yeah. You'd be surprised. I won't go into detail, but you would be surprised what would turn up, what would crop up. Then I left the service for a bit. You know, when you're young and you sort of like, you go from A to B job, from B to Z job, and then you get a bit fed up with it because you're still young and still trying to find your place, yeah, in life. And then I became a sewing machine mechanic. You can believe it. I loved that job. That job was the bee's knees. I'll tell you why I loved it. It's because it gave me so much freedom. You know, you'd go in, you get your jobs, and you'd spend your day out in the field fixing sewing machines, spinning machines, brother machines. Anyone my age will know what I'm talking about. And then you go back to the office, book off, go home. The beauty of going home is only 10 minutes down the road. Yeah? So it didn't feel like I was going anywhere. And I stayed there for, I think, about 7 years. And even when I left, I went back. Yeah, because it was one of those jobs. Back in the day, you could walk out of a job and walk into another one. Literally just walk out the door, say to the boss, hi, go next door, knock on the door, and before you know it, you'd be working behind a counter or whatever it was. Obviously, times have changed now. So from there, I went back to Kennedy Sewing Machines. I stayed there for a good few years. And it was then I decided to join the police service again. And went back to the city, stayed there for a couple of years, and then went over to the Met. And here I am.
And what was it like then, from a kind of a diversity point of view, the Met? Did you feel the kind of lone black voice, or did you find that there were others from your community within the police force at that point? What was the makeup like back then?
It was different, and again, racism within the police service does exist. It existed then, but it existed in a different way depending on who you were, how you came across. If you were the type of person that would speak up for yourself and not be bullied, you would find it wouldn't happen to you as much. And you know it was happening in the background, but not to your face. And if you were someone that weren't speaking up for yourself, then it would probably be a lot worse. And that's how I saw it. There were times I would step in and, I fight at the corner of the only one other black male officer that I was working with. He wasn't my particular team, but you'd hear stories. And, I used to go mental about it, to be honest, to the point that some people didn't like me, but I didn't care, because you can't pick on someone because of the colour of their skin, even though it's subtle, if that makes sense. Yeah, they won't come out with X word or Y word, they would come out with B and F word, which would be, you're reading in between the lines. Yeah. And so there was a lot of that.
So what made you decide to get back to the police then? And despite that subconscious and maybe even conscious racism that was going on within the Met, which it looks like that hasn't changed, looking at the most recent reports, there is still some of this going on, more on an institutional level maybe. But what is it that appealed to you about the job, and what made you stick with it?
I think it's about growing up. Yeah, we all say dogs are all different and they can reach their maturity at different stages, and when they're at different times of when they come to different times of their life. And I think we're no different as human animals. Yeah, once the clubbing stops and I get fed up with that, and meeting up for drinks and get fed up with that, they haven't settled down and started a family, and I think I just grew up mentally, and realised there are stable jobs out there. You've only got to muck up yourself to lose those kind of jobs. Whereas there are jobs out there that you haven't got to muck up. They can go bankrupt within whatever. You're out of your area. That was never going to happen in that kind of job. So that's why I went back.
Before we come on to kind of more the dog side of things and bringing it into focus for the dog industry, listening to your story, Colin, it's crazy really to think that not that long ago in our history as a country, in our society, some of those words you talked about earlier, they're powerful. You were saying things like not allowed, they were not allowed to do this, or they were allowed to do those, always kind of given permission. Some of those signs in the windows, no Irish, no black, no dogs. It's really distressing and disturbing to think that that's what this country was like then. And I know from an LGBTQ point of view, there was similar hostility back in the day. And I think whilst we have a long way to go on lots of areas, I think it is important to recognise that we have moved on a bit. We haven't necessarily moved forward enough, but I think we have moved on a bit. And I think that's quite a place to kind of come into the world, really, isn't it? As a young person who, what age did you feel potentially different from the society around you? Do you remember a point where you thought, because I'm sure when you're very young, you just embrace the love of your parents, right? And the love of those around you, and you just feel special and you feel loved. And there comes a point where you think, actually, I'm not like that. Or I'm not feeling that I'm being treated the same.
It was when I was much younger. We're looking at teens. So you'll be looking at around about when I was about 16, before I hit 20, when you had the local kids you'd meet up, you'd talk, you'd hang around the flats and sit down and smoke cigarettes on the wall. People would come out to you, shut up and be quiet, that type of thing. Was when I would be then sort of going to a friend's house. Yeah. And the friend would say, well, let me just go and check if it's all right. And you can hear the parent saying, yeah, he's all right, he can come.
Yeah. That expression, he's all right. I think that's something we heard. I remember even my grandfather was of a generation, and he had some quite very un-PC views of black people, Asian people, women, gay people. He was of that generation. My grandfather is long since died. But his best mate was a black man. His name was Dell. I remember him. I was very young at the time. My grandfather died a long time ago, but he used to say, "Oh, Dell's all right." And I think it was always an acceptance of this thing about a lot of prejudice is about ignorance and fear.
Yes.
Isn't it? I think. And I think that's a kind of, it shows the connection on a human level. We'll talk about representation a little bit later on, but I think that's interesting because I remember my grandfather using the same terminology. It was almost like the people of the day saying, well, I've actually got to meet somebody on a human level and they're okay. And what they're really saying is, I feel safe, they're okay based on my own prejudice, actually, but I still have to work on my own growth to accept the others. I think that's kind of what I felt about with my grandfather.
That's exactly it. You're okay because you speak the same. You're okay because they totally get you. You're okay to a point that you're still black. Yeah. You're okay so that they feel better about themselves. Yeah. I think that's important that that's thrown in there, is they feel better about themselves. But equally important is that the word okay to them and what it meant to me was quite belittling. It's time to hear that time and time again. And that's when you start to grow up mentally. Yeah. You start to take in who you really are. Yeah. What your values are. And my values was never anything to do with those people I used to know back then. And they were good friends, they were mates. But then I made a choice and a decision. I'm going in this direction simply because I'm sick and tired of there and he's okay. He's more than okay.
And I think for when you hear that, that part of our brain, which will start asking the question, well, if you think I'm okay, why does everybody else not think I'm okay? What is it about me? We end up bringing it about us, really, rather than actually recognizing it is actually about them. And as I say, their own ignorances and their own fears, really. And
I did ask, there was one of my friends, his name was Ian, he was a really top bloke, very mature for his years. And I did ask him one day, why is it your mum and dad always say, yeah, he can come in? Why do you always have to go and ask? And he came out and told me they don't like black people, they are prejudiced and racist. Racist wasn't used back in those days, the word prejudice was used more. Okay. And it was having that discussion with Ian. Me going into his house after that was never the same. It was never the same. Yeah.
How could it be, though? I think it's at the level of how could you feel safe and comfortable where you? There's a huge difference, isn't there? I think, Colin, this is really important actually between tolerance and acceptance.
Yes.
I know with my own kind of in my own LGBTQ community, we've fought not for tolerance. We don't want people to tolerate us. We want to be accepted. And I think part of that experience for you in that family was a sense of tolerating. We have this bias, but we'll tolerate Colin because he's okay. That's tough, Colin. That's hard.
It was tough, but when I look back on it, I was tolerating them. Yeah. It didn't feel like that at the time. Yeah. I suppose you put up with it until you find your feet, you find your head. And the man upstairs, the landlord God, he will come down to you at some point and say, right, this is your time now to move on. Yeah. This is your time. You have now grown up. You have now understood where you need to be because this is not the place. And that's exactly what I did. I pulled away because it was never the same seeing those friends again because it was every single one of them. Yeah.
Did you find initially that there was almost a little part of your brain that wanted that acceptance through that phrase, he's okay? Was that something that you felt at some point, or did you feel that uncomfortableness right from the start?
No, that's a very good point to pick up. When you're young and you're naive, you're not you don't understand, well, how can you, because you're still young. To begin with, it felt like acceptance. I'll get that one out there. This is where people of colour can start to be confused. Now, when I say people of colour, I'm talking people that are more of mixed race. Yeah, because they'll always be looked upon as black. Yeah, you can start to be, you look to it as acceptance, but I think it's more subconscious acceptance. Conscious, if that makes sense. And then as you get a little bit older, you realise that I am black. I want to be black. I'm proud to be black. I want to move on.
Yeah.
But it was when I was quite young.
And I think, I think so many people can, I think we can all relate to that, actually. When I say when you're young, you want to create safe social connections. You want to feel accepted. You want to feel,
yes,
you want to feel those things to feel safe. So there's quite a big shift for our brain then at some point when you think actually those previously perceived safe relationships were anything but, actually, because it was safety on somebody else's terms.
Just thinking back to those days, it was bad. It was dark, because when I now think about it, every single one of them used to come to my house. Not once did I have to open the door and say, Mum or Dad, can they come in?
Yeah.
Even from the very first time someone entered the house, because I knew my mum and dad would accept them.
Mm.
And accept them, they always did. Yeah. Only one person ever picked up on that, and he was a very good mate, Dean, who actually said to me, I love coming around here because I get to eat lots, yeah, and we can come straight through the door. Because to be fair, it was only his house that I never had that issue.
It's interesting.
Yeah. It was only his house, I never had that issue. Yeah, you opened the door, we went in, and his mum and dad were happy.
Yeah. And I think I remember when I was at uni and I first come out, and I remember going to a friend from uni's house, and I had a similar experience. It's not the same, I know, but only as far as I was just told to straighten up. And this is the thing, isn't it? It's the kind of it's that notion. I know Kira and I, we've got a really good friend who's an Indian friend of ours, and he was in the fire service, and he's probably getting on for 50 now, I think. But and he's retired from the fire service. But back in the day, he'd just tell racist jokes about himself almost to fit in. You know, he felt that was the safe way to be there, to kind of go along with the jokes and to be the butt of the jokes, because that way he could just fit in and feel safe through self-degradation. It's harsh, isn't it? To kind of find yourself in that situation in your work life where you have to almost degrade yourself on a daily basis just to feel safe to fit in.
It is sad. Different now, yeah, than when it was then. There were very few black children at school or in certain areas. So yes, subconsciously you would do stuff like that in order to fit in. I suppose I was lucky in one sense in the area we lived in, which was Finsbury Park. Ignorant people back then found other people to ridicule. Yeah, they were tended to be the Asian community, and that was very sickening in itself. Yeah, so being okay started to make sense to what, in some sense, you're okay if you're black, but you're not really. Yeah, but you're okay because I don't like them.
Yeah.
I like them less. So, like I said, as you get a bit older and you start to grow up mentally, that's when you put it into perspective and you say, you know what, I won't say it on here, it's begins with an F, you, and we're moving on because I'm better than that. Yeah. You know, I'm proud of who I am. I'm always going to be back.
This is what's so amazing, I think, for your story, really. I think thank you for sharing so much with us as well, Colin, about your backstory and that you found that strength of self despite all that, because a lot of that stuff can really, change our view of self. It can really devalue self and our own coping mechanisms that we have to go through. It's like our friend who was in the fire service. He very different now, but he recognized at the time he created new versions of self just to try and fit in. And I think when you left the Met, then was that when you went? Did you go from the Met into the dog training side of things? Then was that pretty well how it worked?
You know what? The dog training side has been on and off back in those days. It was on and off, obviously, when you're in the service, and you're limited to how much you could do. So it was mainly on days off that I would do bits and pieces. The dog training really took off more, say, in the very late 90s, going into the early 2000s. Yeah, that's when it started to really become powerful and meaningful. And then over the years, then it just becomes stronger and stronger to what I am doing today in the industry. But that was always something that's been on and off, if I'm being honest about that.
And that on and off, was that you learning on and off, or was there times of you doing it professionally on and off and being the dog trainer? Because it sounds like this Beverly person, by the way, Colin. My God, we all need a Beverly. She sounds like she was way ahead of her time. Bless her.
Beverly Robinson was away of her time, and it was. Well, okay. So having met Beverly, and she was awesome, and the way she did things when I looked how the day I am as a trainer at Force 3, that was Beverly back then. Yeah. Although back then there was still the use of choke chains, etc., etc., she didn't use a choke chain in a stupid way. Yeah. Yeah. But I hasten to add very quickly, before I even met Beverly, that's when I was very, very balanced. And all the information I got from past trainers, the ones that you seem to be stumbling across, you stumbled across, and they taught me to do some awful things. Yeah. To which I've not looked back to onto today. But having met Beverly, she actually put me in touch with a guy called Roy Hunter. Yeah. And Angela Pittman, if she's listening, will know exactly who Roy Hunter is. Because he was way ahead of everybody. Yeah. And what that guy taught me stuck, and just made me more conscious about wanting to be a dog trainer.
So when you think about that, then, so we met 6 or 7 years ago, like we said at the beginning. That was online because there was the online option. I'm guessing when you first made the kind of move to doing things more structurally within the dog world, was that pre going online? Were you doing stuff before coming online as a dog trainer, or was it
early stuff? All for me was more the basic stuff online, and then I became, if you like, really entrenched in dog training. And right this moment, sat here now, in the late 2000s, so 2008 was when it really kicked off for me. Yeah, and it's been non-stop. Yeah. Building the business, CK90S would be more in, where are we, 2023, that would have been 2008, 2012, yeah.
Yeah. And what, kind of tying in some of these things then, so I want to come on to the importance of collaboration support, but how did you find the dog training industry when you came into it regarding I guess there wasn't much good positive representation at the time. I don't know about what part of the industry you were kind of connected to at the time, but did you feel any of your past experiences played out again when you came into the dog community? Was it different? Did you feel that you were somehow different?
If I'm being honest, not to begin with. And again, I was just more focused on learning stuff. So there were nice people, to be honest, that I had met. And then when I came to be a part of Facebook, which, believe it or not, was not until 2015, 2016.
Yeah, about the same as me.
Yeah, 2016 was when 2016 actually. In fact, it was March 2016 when I hit Facebook and I spoke to Lisa Tenzin Dolma, and then go to the ICP, and then was on, because that the Facebook group. So that was the only reason why I joined Facebook, was because of the ICP group. I still didn't really pick up on anything at that point. Yeah. But as the years moved on, and I was seeing more and more people of colour coming into the industry, and let's take away people of colour and also adding different minorities, whether they were Czechoslovakian or Greek or what have you. Yeah, and I started to see there was more people of different backgrounds. Then I started to notice difference. Yeah, you could tell by the way someone would ridicule someone's post, or someone's answer or response. So as you do, they hover across and just go and see, that's probably why, because that person isn't from the UK. Yeah, or they're in the UK but not born in the UK. And you start to see a pattern of this over the years. To the point where we are today, it's sickening. But not just for people of colour, for anyone on Facebook is a horrible place to be at times. So for me, it's not just about whether you are BIPOC or whatever. It's about individual people going about their daily business to enjoy the industry, enjoy that passionate thing they really want to do every day, being ridiculed, discriminated against, bullied in the workplace, so to speak, because I always look at Facebook when I'm working, I'm in the workplace, and I don't really get up to go to work to be bullied or, treated in that way, so why should someone else be? But you do see a lot of that. Whether the person is from the LGBT community, you see a lot of that. Whether they are disabled, I see a lot of that. So it's about people that feel like they are empowered in some way to bully others.
Yeah, I think that this brings us on to the need for us to find safe ways and safe spaces to support others. Because I think a lot of people come into the community, and we were talking off air about how it does seem to be, maybe we're looking through rose-tinted spectacles here, but it seems to be maybe the last 4 or 5 years, there's just been this real explosion, really, of quite challenging and very combative styles within the social media space within our community, and we've also somehow ended up being convinced that we've got some sort of very aggressively competitive industry, that it's not enough just to be the best you can, you somehow have to be better than somebody else, and the need to be right and the need to be seen to be right. I think this is something that kind of all these things come in, and then underneath of that, just the kind of witch hunts that come about, that people just pile in on a thread when they whiff a bit of blood sometimes, I think, and you tend to see that the same people actually. It tends to, it's really important when we talk about this, I think, to remember that the vast majority of our community actually, in my experience, are very kind, caring, compassionate, hardworking people. The silent majority, I call them, because they're not necessarily the ones who are on all the time or the ones who dive into the drama. But and this is something that you have clearly really identified, Colin, because you've put your flag up and said, I am that safe space.
Yes.
You can come to me, whether that's, I know there's a lot of trainers locally who have really experienced that sense of collaboration and support. And it's interesting how many professionals are a bit wary or suspicious or nervous of collaboration.
Yes.
But it's important, isn't it, I think, for us to try and reach out to those, especially those physically around us, because we need that, right? We need to go down the pub and have a pint and talk about stuff and or whatever it is that we need to do.
When I see or feel that someone on social media has had a hard time, I actually see it here. And one of the first things I sometimes do, or often do, is message that individual. Yeah, because I have had bad experiences with that person, and as an individual, just as a person, kind of doesn't always play that role or come into it. There are times just as an individual, something's just not going right. Yeah, and you can feel isolated. I know what it's like to feel alone. And like I said back then, there was no one there to really help you or support you. Yeah. Whereas today, I look around and I think, why is this happening? Look how many people are around this person. They're all fighting for the same cause. Yeah. The betterment of dogs. Yeah. So I get this. Okay, they may have got that wrong. So what? Is that really important? Has anyone died here? Yeah. Are you going to lose your house over it? No, I don't think so. So let's support this person. If we're going to criticize them, and anyone that knows me knows that if I give criticism, it's got to be followed by constructive criticism. That has to be followed. You can't say to someone, "Oh, that's not the way you do it. We don't do it like that. How you should have added this, you should have added that, blah, 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 not getting stressed, blah, blah, blah." How about just giving them what you do, showing them what you do, instead of bullying, intimidating, because that's how it can sometimes come across, even though that person may not be intentionally thinking that way. Yeah, the speed of wanting to get your vote across can make it all go wrong. Look, I don't get it, and I'm more likely to reach out to people that I can clearly see or feel they may not be, they may be quite strongly. Anything of that, I don't really care. But more often than not, they do care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think a lot of the time things that get said on Facebook and comments and things, it's just the momentary lack of a filter for some people. They don't necessarily think about how that would be interpreted by the other person. And some things are actually deliberately hurtful and hateful, actually. We know that. And that comes from somebody else's, poor place, their own trauma often, or whatever it is that experiences. But I think it's the accumulative effect over time, Colin. I was sharing with you that I had somebody contact me to have a look at an article for the group. And I said, yeah, that's great. It's brilliant. I'm more than happy for you to put in the group. And then they messaged it well after to say that they put something out a few years ago. And even though the bulk of the comments were really supportive, there was a couple that were quite negative. And that was enough to stop her not putting anything out for like 3 years. And I just wonder how many wonderfully rich voices we lose because of people's unthoughtful and sometimes unkind comments. How many great voices we lose out on because they don't feel represented. Actually, they don't look at the community and think, I feel safe enough to put myself out there, because it's tough to put yourself out there. It just is. Every time you put something out, to get that kind of scrutiny. And I think this is something as a wider community we need to look at thinking about creating more of that environment, I think.
You're just talking about the people that have posted or put themselves out there and then retreated. I'm also thinking about the hundreds of people that see all this and don't even bother going out there.
I hear you. And what must the general public think? Because they share a lot of these forums, Colin. What must they think? Even, and this isn't just for for us everyday folk. We had Victoria Stillwell came and had a chat in the group, and she shared very passionately how it hurts for her. It hurts when it doesn't matter how much where you are in the community regarding kind of profile and presence and things like that. I think it's so seeking safe connections and finding collaborations isn't just about us saying to others, I can be a safe space, you can find me, but it also helps us, right, Colin? I know myself, I've had my own kind of stuff that's been thrown at me over the years, and especially last year I had some quite difficult things that were being said about me which were untrue, but you never get a right to reply, there's never any accountability, right? It's because of the safe connections that I've supported that were there for me then. I think that's really important. It's a collaboration's a two-way thing, and we need each other. We need each other because it's a tough job. It's a tough life, regardless of the job we do. We need to find those connections, I think, because it can become very lonely and you can become very isolated, I think.
The industry is a very lonely place. And if we're all in belief that we are trying to reach that objective of wanting to always be force-free, treating dogs humanely, we need to pull together in order to get to that goal. Because fighting and working against each other doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, I'm not going to steal your business. You're not going to steal my business. There are enough dogs to go around. We can sit down and have coffee together and talk about how we can move forward as an industry. Yeah. But when people like yourself, Andrew, where you've built your group, that's a safe place. Okay. Tori Cooper, that's a very safe space. Yeah. There are very few and far between groups, yeah, especially here in the UK, where I would say, yeah, I belong. Yeah. I dip in and out of groups for all different reasons for a learning experience, and I'm gone. Yeah. But in certain groups, I'm there commenting because I enjoy being in that safe space. Yeah. There are enough people out there that have the same beliefs as myself, the same work ethics as myself, and it's for us to pull together. Yeah. And when we see these things on Facebook, one thing I don't like getting into is drama. Yeah. So I pull back from that drama. I go and tackle it from a different angle. That's when I'm more likely to send a message to the individual person and say, look, I'm here if you need a chat. Yeah. And more often than not, I end up chatting with people. I feel sorry for them after that because I talk a lot. But it makes me feel good that I've helped. It's nice to keep in touch, to see people grow. Yeah. And if it's to the point where they are feeling that imposter syndrome, then I will invite them to come back to the classes or come out on one-to-ones with me. Yeah. And 9 out of 10 of them will always leave me feeling, hang on a minute, it should be me who's leaning on you. Because people believe that they're not good. They're not as good as that person. How do you really know that person's any good anyway? You don't.
And that's a really important point there, because I think many of us, from quite a young age, with our own stories, hear a lot of messages that kind of tell us that we aren't good enough, actually, and that we somehow have to be that. We have to conform. We have to be this, and this to kind of fit in, and to come into a community where there's a lot of pressure to be something that isn't necessarily authentic. Hello. Being mobbed by Afghans here. Sorry, Colin. I know. I'll let you darling. I remember, I've spoken to you on the phone about some. There's very few places that I feel safe we can talk to, and you're one of them. And I've shared with you in the past. And actually, you let me talk, Colin. I think that's the point. That's what we want sometimes. And everything is an invitation to things, and embracing our differences, whilst recognizing we all predominantly share the same values when it comes to what we're here for, actually, which is the support of dogs. I think that's something we forget about. I look at some of the discussions, Colin, and I think, where did we get to that point? Because we're so off the mark now. It's challenging, and we're coming up to the hour. That's what's flown by, Colin, really. But for you then, it's a big question to ask you, Colin. So you don't have to answer it because it is a big one. I know. If only we could just flip a switch. But what do you think we need to be looking at as a community, as an industry? How do we make it so that those, especially those from less represented, more marginalized groups, feel safe enough to turn up and to contribute, let alone anything else, really, I think. And also more widely, what is it we need to do to try and pull away from this, very aggressively competitive format that we seem to have dived into somehow?
For me, it's quite easy. I think we concentrate far too much on the dog when we really should be realizing dogs need us as much as we need them. And for them to feel safe, they will need us to help them feel safe. And if we're all collaborating together to make that safe space, regardless of who you're collaborating with, yes, we're going to have differences. We're not always going to agree with everything you do and vice versa. But guess what? We are professional enough, big enough, old enough to get on with it for the betterment of the dog. It's that simple. Regardless of the colour, regardless of your gender, regardless if you're disabled. We should all be pulling in the same direction and supporting each other.
Well, I think they're very wise words, and I think it reminds me of something I read recently that it was I wouldn't have done it that way myself, and that's okay. We can say that. We can look at something and think, I wouldn't do it that way myself, but that's okay. You know?
Absolutely.
And we need to support each other. We need to try and champion each other. I think it is about finding those safe spaces. I think I would invite anybody just to ask a very simple question. Do I feel safe here or not? Whether that's a relationship online, whether it's a group, whether it's a page. And I think it's much better just to kind of quietly remove ourselves from situations or places that we don't feel safe. Some places we think, I don't feel safe here necessarily, but this is a place that I need to be part of. So what adaptations do I have to make to kind of help me to feel safe? And to remember that all this here, when we turn off that laptop, when we turn off our phone or our computer, this is real life around us, and making those real connections. That's what I loved about crafts. I know I've got mixed feelings about crafts. I've shared about that before, but the one good thing, Colin, was, and I missed you sadly, but was just the kind of be with people and to remind ourselves, oh my God, we're part of a brotherhood, sisterhood, really, of people trying to do the very best that we can. And the majority of our colleagues are that.
I totally agree with you. The majority of people I come across that I've actually met in real life on social media have been absolutely gems. And a lot of those people have inspired me to even do more. Because there's some wonderful people out there. May we get more wonderful people that will enable other people to come forward to feel safe.
Well, you certainly do that, Colin. And, I really value our friendship, and I really appreciate you talking to us today and just being so open and being vulnerable. I think it's okay to be that sometimes. And like you say, it's very easy to get sucked into the negative focus of another. And I think that's what we all have to look at. And we have to try and keep ourselves healthy in that kind of social media space, especially. Hello, darling. I love you. This is Reese. Well, thank you, Colin. Thank you, everybody, for listening in today. I really appreciate it, Colin. And I'm going to be taking a little break from Facebook Lives for a week or two. We've had quite a few amazing ones all together, and I've caught up with some now. All good things come to those that wait, Colin. So it was definitely worth the wait to see you tonight. I love you, my friend, and thank you so much for talking with us tonight. Where can people find more Colin?
We're on Instagram, Colin's Canine Training Services. We now hit Instagram thanks to my lovely team that have worked hard to get us out there on Insta. Obviously on my personal page. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can actually email me at my private personal email address, which is mrc. My surname Spence 63@outlook.com.
Well, thank you, Colin, and we'll share some links and that kind of thing. And I can feel the love in the room. So thank you so much. And thank you everybody for tuning in. I'll be sharing some new chats that I'm going to be arranging soon. So I'm having a little break for a week or two. And anybody who's going to the Gun Dog Conference next week, I'm talking up there. So I'll see you there. Come and say hi. It's in person, Colin. How about that? An in-person gig. Nice. Right. Good night, everybody. Thanks very much for tuning in. Thanks, Colin.